welcome back to Waiting in Laodicea. I'm your host, A.T. Martinez, and today we're going to continue with our discussion of standing up for God and false prophets. False prophets, false teachers, antichrists, the whole collection. But before we do this, let's go ahead and look what the Bible has to say. I'm going to go ahead and replay those verses, and I've added another one. And then I will go in, give you an explanation. We'll go through the chapters, we'll go through the verses and try to make some sense of it and show you how, hopefully, this will either finalize how to stand up for your beliefs, or maybe that'll be a third.
Matthew 24. Reading from the New King James Version. Starting in verse 21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, Look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Matthew 7. Reading from the New King James Version. You will know them by their fruits. Starting in verse 15. Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore by their fruits you will know them. Matthew 24. Reading from the New King James Version. Starting in verse 21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning. Titus 1. Reading from the New King James Version. The elder's task. Starting in verse 10. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole households, teaching things which they ought not, for the sake of dishonest gain. One of them, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. Therefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn from the truth. To the pure all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving nothing is pure, but even their mind and conscience are defiled. They profess to know God, but in works they deny him, being abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work. 2 Peter 2. Reading from the New King James Version. Destructive doctrines. But there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. By covetousness they will exploit you with deceptive words, for a long time their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. Doom of false teachers. Continuing in verse 4. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked, for that righteous man, dwelling among them, tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds, then the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment, and especially those who walk according to the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise authority. They are presumptuous, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignitaries, whereas angels, who are greater in power and might, do not bring a reviling accusation against them before the Lord. Depravity of false teachers. Continuing in verse 12. But these, like natural brute beasts made to be caught and destroyed, speak evil of the things they do not understand, and will utterly perish in their own corruption, and will receive the wages of unrighteousness, as those who count it pleasure to carouse in the daytime. They are spots and blemishes, carousing in their own deceptions while they feast with you, having eyes full of adultery and that cannot cease from sin, enticing unstable souls. They have a heart trained in covetous practices, and are accursed children. They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but he was rebuked for his iniquity. A dumb donkey speaking with a man's voice restrained the madness of the prophet. These are wells without water, clouds carried by a tempest, for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Deceptions of false teachers. Continuing in verse 18. For when they speak great swelling words of emptiness, they allure through the lusts of the flesh, through lewdness, the ones who have actually escaped from those who live in error. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are slaves of corruption, for by whom a person is overcome, by him also he is brought into bondage. For if, after they have escaped the pollutions of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and overcome, the latter end is worse for them than the beginning. For it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness, than having known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered to them. But it has happened to them according to the true proverb, a dog returns to his own vomit, and, a sow, having washed, to her wallowing in the mire. To John. Reading from the New King James Version. Beware of Antichrist deceivers. Starting in verse 7. For many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. Look to yourselves, that we do not lose those things we worked for, but that we may receive a full reward. Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house nor greet him, for he who greets him shares in his evil deeds. 1 John 4. Reading from the New King James Version. Love for God and one another. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming, and is now already in the world. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They are of the world. Therefore they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. We are of God. He who knows God hears us, he who is not of God does not hear us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. 1 Corinthians 8. Reading from the New King James Version. Be sensitive to conscience. Now concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. Therefore concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and through whom we live. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge, for some, with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren, and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble.
Okay, we're back. Now that was quite a few chapters and verses, and we're going to go through each and every one of these verses in a moment. First, let me try to get the points out here. You see, what I'm talking about right here in these verses is basically false prophets, antichrists, and false teachers. These people are out there presenting information that is wrong. This is false and is being done to lead the people astray. And the Bible tells us right there in Matthew 24, Christ himself is stating that these people are out to deceive, and they are doing so to deceive. And they will deceive even the elect, meaning you and me and the Christians. So, now, I realize so far we haven't gotten to the idea of standing up for your beliefs. Well, that's because first thing you got to do is make sure what you're standing up for is right. So let's take a look at these. What is it you're standing up for your beliefs from? The world. We know the world is against us. We've been told this for over 2,000 years. But most of us don't let that sink in our heads. Why? Because for many years, the world was supposedly on our side. We know Satan's after us. And now, with the rise of the false prophets and the false teachers, so is our own church. We are conforming our beliefs to make the world happy. Now, I will tell you, there are 3 reasons why we get false teachers and false prophets. We have people that are doing so because they're changing things and altering the message for good intentions. We have those who are trying to, they've made a mistake. They're accidentally bringing out a false message. It's not done intentionally. And then, of course, you have those that are directly responding to Satan, and those are your intentionally false messages. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at them. And then we're going to go back through those verses, and we're going to see which they're talking about. First off, the good intentions. We've all heard that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And guess what? It's true. Because a lot of times, churches and Christians will change their beliefs or alter the way they present their beliefs in order to be nice. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. This could make somebody uncomfortable. Why don't we rephrase this or give less importance to this, downplay this, so as to not hurt someone's feelings? Another reason why churches have a tendency to do these things is, bottom line, put people in the pews. You need to fill those seats up. That way they feel they are justified before the Lord. Well, Lord, I changed your message, but look at all the people that came. They're turning it into basically a popularity contest. They're trying to be popular within society itself and show society, see, not all Christians are this way. Some of us can be nice and caring and go along with you. See, you have no reason to be angry at us. The problem in this one is the Bible has told us over and over again they're going to hate you for his name. If you serve the Lord, if you serve Christ, you will be hated. The world will go after you. You will be attacked in God's name because they don't like what he has to say. They don't like God. Another way people have another good intention gone astray is the idea, well, it's good for me, so obviously it must be good for them. It's helped my life, so it's going to help you too. And this is why we got the new verse that was put in, and that's the idea of, is it right to eat the meat that has been sacrificed to an idol? It was covered in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and it all comes down to one thing. It's your choice. And if it is your choice, it isn't your right to tell another not to do it. Now, it does say that if my brother isn't enlightened enough to not stumble over it, then I shouldn't eat the meat in front of him. The point, folks, is too often in our lives we think something is a good idea. And we try to tell others, well, this is for your own good. You need to do this because this will make your life better. And again, it's a good intention. We know where those lead. The final example of changing the Bible or altering our beliefs from good intentions is sometimes we will alter things in order to give a greater impact. God wasn't harsh enough, so we're going to lower the boom and make sure you realize this is evil and you must stop. When somebody is engaging in a life of sin, they don't need us to tell them how evil what they're doing is. They don't need us to harp on them. They don't need us to badger them and berate them. They need us to love them. And to sit there and try to make something more evil than it already is, it's kind of messed up. Evil is evil. There's no greater evil. There's no greater sin. All sins are evil. All sins are equal in the sight of God. There is no, that's a little white sin. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. And to sit there and raise or elevate certain sins over others, you may have had good intentions. You may be trying to get certain people to pay attention, and this is why you're doing it. But in the same token, you're also maybe kind of protecting your own sins and being able to downplay them. Now, the second reason why people alter their beliefs, they tend to misspeak. I have a bad habit of that myself. There are times I'll say certain things, but I meant something else. And the sad part is, when we make these mistakes, too often our ego won't let us correct them. We get angry at the people that we're dealing with because they misunderstood. No, actually, they understood us clearly. We misspoke. And it's a failing we have, and it's something that as teachers and preachers, you got to really be careful of. Because one misspoken sentence, one thing that you've twisted and said wrong, if you don't correct it, then you're standing up for a lie. Another way people have a tendency to alter things, and again, accidentally, is because they misunderstand what they're talking about. They've read something, they didn't get the correct understanding of it, they didn't understand, and yet they're going to sit there and talk to us about it. They're going to condemn on based on their own misunderstandings. And this is bad. And if our egos will not allow us to take a look and see that we made a mistake or that we didn't understand, then we need to work on that. The last one, example of an accidentally false, I call it misremembering in traditions. We have a lot of traditions inside Christianity. Every denomination has their own traditions. And then there are shared traditions that are shared between all the denominations. I'll give you a great example. Why is Christmas December 25th? We know Christ was not born on December 25th. He was born sometime in the early spring. So why is December 25th the date that's supposed to be used? Well, the reality is that's because early Christians put that holiday there so that it was on top of the Feast of Juno, or Jupiter, I believe it was. The idea was you can't take away the celebration from the people. So they moved it. And we have a lot of traditions, as I said, in the church. And some of those traditions are wrong. I grew up going to a Southern Baptist church. There's a tradition in the Southern Baptist church that says dancing is evil. This is the very, very concept that was brought out in the movie Footloose. Dancing is a sin. But yet, David danced before the Lord. See? This is a case of a tradition being wrong. Now, yes, is there some forms of dancing that should not be allowed? Yeah, I'm sorry. Some of the dancing, that's not dancing. That's just sex with your clothes on. But that's not what they're saying. When you say all dancing is wrong, then you have made a law that doesn't exist in the Bible, that actually contradicts the Bible. So you, in supporting your traditions, and people that support these traditions, may very well be contradicting the Bible. Now, between these two groups, we have enough problems in the church. We have enough things that makes it hard. Because when we as Christians stand up for Christ, number one, we need to know that when we're standing up for Him, what we're saying supports what He said. If we're saying, no, dancing is evil, dancing is a sin, well, God never said that. And to stand up for that view is, again, you're taking something that is right or wrong for you and forcing it on others. It's not our place. Now, the last reason why doctrine has changed is because Satan wants it so. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to ask you a simple question, and I want you to think about it a second. And I'm even going to go ahead, and we're going to pause while you think on this. Which one of these things, which of these are actually supported and caused by the devil? Which ones of the first two or the third one, which is the Antichrists, are supported by the devil, are directly because of the devil? Now think about it. Which ones does the devil cause? Now, as you're sitting there thinking, I'm going to go ahead and remain quiet. I'm going to give you a minute to think. I know, we're going to have dead air for a minute. Oh well, I'm not national television. I can do this. Think about this. Let me get my tech crew to give me my stopwatch. I want to make sure we only do 1 minute because it's important for you to realize certain things. So we're going to start with thinking. Are you ready? Here's your time to think about it. Okay, I cheated. I hit the stop button. I'm going to hope you took your full minute to think about it. But I decided to go on. The answer is all of them. Satan causes each and every one of these things to take place. We, instead of standing up for our beliefs, we conform our beliefs so that we are not hurtful, that we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We want to put people in the pews. We want to be liked. And all of this is being pushed on us because of Satan. All of the first two ways of doctrine being changed are done by Satan. The third one is directly done by Satan. It's not indirectly where Satan just messes us up. It's direct and intentionally trying to manipulate the beliefs of Christianity for a reason. And yes, this is foretold. We know the intent is to lead us astray. We see this in Matthew chapter 24 in the Olivet Discourse. We see in verse 4, and Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and will deceive many. If you take and go down to verse 9, they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And verse 10, many will be offended, will betray one another, will hate one another. Boy, what does that sound like? America today? The world today. And lawlessness will abound. This is let me back up. The many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of the many will grow cold. That's Christ's own words, warning us what's coming. And the intent is to deceive. And we see further in the Olivet Discourses that Christ tells you that if anybody says Christ is over here, don't look. If anybody says he's in the desert, don't go. Why? Because false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. That's verse 23. 26. Therefore they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go. Look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes in the west, so also will the Son of Man be. Bottom line, God isn't going to come down and walk around on the earth incognito to start with. When he shows up, it's going to be big. Let's go ahead and now we're going to go ahead and go into these verses. I'll go back to some of the other. No, let's go ahead and stay with it. Why is Satan doing this? Why is he deceiving? Well, because that gets more people on his side. How is he deceiving? He's trying to dilute and undermine the values of Christianity. If he can get us to change even parts of it today, then in the future, it'll be easier to get us to change the next part and the next part. And eventually, we'll be saying Christ did not come in the flesh. And when we do that, we are no longer supporting Christ. There are world churches that take with the viewpoint that there was no Christ. Christ was not the Savior. He's just another prophet. The Muslims consider him just a prophet. And the minute we water down who Christ was, we water down our religion to nothingness. Because you cannot be a Christian without Christ. So, what he does is he's trying to change things just a little bit at a time. Just like you've heard the old adage that if you're going to try to boil a frog to get frog legs, if you drop a frog into a hot water, he jumps out. But if you put him into a regular pot of water and turn on the heat and let the heat slowly rise up, he'll die. Why? Because a little bit at a time he doesn't notice. Your final reason why some people are serving Satan to do this and changing the doctrine is money, sex, and power. I'm putting all three of them together because the reality is they're so intertwined. We have ministers that have gone out who have changed their views so they can get more money. Hey, it's more popular, so hey, it leads to more money. Money, money, money. I need a new limousine. I want a new jet. I only have 4 mansions. Our church only is worth $1 billion. We need a bigger, cheap church. We need a great cathedral with glass that is shining on the hill so that everybody knows how prosperous we are. And bottom line, hate sells, but righteous hate sells real well. And that leads to power. Ministers who have used this as a means to gather public support and popularity so that they can influence and be a mover and a shaker. And yes, that tends to lead to a lot of them having sex with a lot of people. And we've seen too many examples of our ministers who have been taken down this way. So now let's go ahead and look in the verses. The second one we have that we're going to look at is 1 John chapter 4. Beginning in verse 4, we see that it says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." Now, we're going to jump down to verse 4. "You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They are of the world, therefore they speak as of the world." We have a lot of people of the world that are speaking as of the world, but doing so from the pulpit. The world hears them, but we are of God, and we should know that God hears us. Next one. By the way, which one of these is? Which category would you put this in? Is this the accidental? This is intentional? Or is this a mistake? Yeah, most likely this is the intentional. This is the false prophets. Now we go to 2 John, starting in verse 7. "For many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist." All right, we know right there that puts them in the third category. They're directly working for Satan. And it says, whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. Okay. Bottom line, if your doctrine doesn't support Christ, then you are not a Christian. Matthew 7. Again, the words of Christ himself. "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves." Now Christ tells us you're going to know them by their fruits. And I love this example that he gives. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? No. Do you get apples from an orange tree? No. You get apples from an apple tree. And if their fruits are not the right type of fruits, then you know something's wrong. Now Titus chapter 1, starting in verse 10, we hear there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, whose mouths, in verse 11, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole households, teaching things which they ought not, for the sake of dishonest gain. Now this is a combination of all three. Some of it, as we see down a little bit further, those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. Oh, sorry, that's not the one. No, we see in verse 13. This testimony is true, therefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn from the truth. Now this shows us that sometimes their intent isn't evil. Sometimes their intent is, well, it's tradition. It's part of a Jewish story. Well, now it's part of a Catholic story or a Baptist story. Well, it's what we believed in for the last 100 years, so whether you believed in it for 100 years doesn't make it right. If it's not in the Bible, it's not correct. Those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. This tells us there are people out there that are looking for reasons to defile everything around them because the way they see the world is defiled. Continuing on. 1 John chapter 2, it says, do not love the world. This goes back to the poor people that are doing number one. They're changing things to please the world. If you love the world, then you don't love the Father. You can't love Christ and love the world. Not in that sense. In the sense of you can't serve both. The world wants us all to be defiled. They want us all to be as depraved as they are, so that they can feel justified in their depravity. Christ wants us all to be pure as He is. Can't have it both ways. You either serve the world or you serve God. And this is something you need to make that choice on. Now, 2 Peter chapter 2. I included the whole chapter because it talks about several things. First off, destructive doctrines. Now we hear that there are false prophets among the people, and even there will be false teachers among you who will secretly bring in destructive heresies. They're making up stories. Now some of them are not doing it on purpose. It's just their nature. The problem with them is who walks according to the flesh and the lust of uncleanness and despise authority. They are presumptuous, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignitaries. And as Peter says flat out, God punished the angels. Imagine what He's going to do to us. Now, when you look and read this chapter, you see that a lot of these people have forsaken the right way for whatever their motivations. They've been led astray, and they haven't returned to what is right. They are wells without water, clouds carried by the tempest, for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Now, if we look down, starting in verse 18, for when they speak great swelling words of emptiness, they allure through the lusts of flesh, through lewdness, the ones who have actually escaped from those who live in error. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are a slave of corruption, and by whom a person is overcome, by him also is he brought into bondage. Bottom line, they promise you the world, but they don't deliver it. They promise you will be free. You don't have to live by those rules. Enjoy yourself. If it feels good, it's okay. All they're doing is trying to help you put a shackle around your throat. They're condemning you to the slavery of sin, the slavery of the body. And if you talk to anybody who's ever been an addict, they'll tell you what that's like. You are a slave to the needs of your own body. And these needs and these wants only hurt you even more. And this is the part that really got to me. After they escaped the pollutions of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and overcome. The latter is worse for them than the beginning, for it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than to have known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered to them. Basically, what this is saying is how far they dropped. To be freed from sin, and then to voluntarily choose to be a slave to sin. Now, these people, all of these examples of the accidental and the good intentioned ones, they just grabbing sin back and taking it to their hearts. Most of their mistakes are caused by ego. They've made a mistake, but they can't admit that. Because if you admit, well, I messed up, I said this wrong, then you don't come off as infallible. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, it's a trap. Because I am fallible. I make mistakes. Ask my kids, they'll tell you. The bottom line is, as I am talking to you today, sometimes maybe I will make a mistake. Maybe I'll missay something. And if I do, catch me on it. Don't be afraid to send me an email and say, hey, AT, that's not what the Bible says. Show me. And I will promise you, when you do, if I made an honest mistake, I will admit it. Because I don't want to let my ego help me to lead you astray. Now, I will tell you, I do my best not to. But I'm human. We're all human. Ego leads people down the wrong paths. Ego gets people to think, well, I know what's best. No, I don't know what's best other than Christ. I don't know whether or not it's better for me to eat the meat that was offered to an idol or not. I do know that I like meat. Beyond that, if my eating something was offered to an idol is something that is going to cause somebody else to stumble, then I don't want to do that in front of him. I want to do that away from him so I don't bring him down. I don't want to be an accidental false prophet. I don't want to be an accidental false teacher. I don't want to be an antichrist. I'm not here to tell you Jesus is in the desert. I'm here to tell you I hope he's inside you and each and every one of you, and that we're just waiting for his return so we can all be together. And I hope I'm here to help you prepare for that. Now we have that final group. The one that are intentionally want to make you stumble. These are the people that are going to go out of their way to mess you up. Why? For some of them, it's because that makes them feel better. For others, it's because there's a profit in it. And last but not least, it's because their true master has told them to do this. And some of them will be blessed with powers. They will be able to perform miracles. They will do things that people are going to sit back and go, wow, that guy just did that. Surely he's got, a hotline to the Lord. No, he's got a hotline to somewhere else. Because the fruits of their labor is what shows. Not what they say, but what it leads to. Now remember, if it is of God, there is no confusion. If what they're talking about just adds to confusion and disruption and basically just messes everything up, then the odds are they're not of God. So when you're looking at the idea of, well, but it's going to be nice, it'll stop us from hurting people's feelings, the truth sometimes hurts people's feelings. I mean, how many times as a kid were you told, don't do something, and that hurts your feelings? I know, my kids were told, don't play with fire. It'll burn you. Guess what? Fire burns whether you like it or not. And if my telling you this hurts your feelings, I'm sorry. Reality is reality, though. And the reality is, you either serve God 100% or you serve the world. And when you're looking at your doctrine and you're looking at your beliefs, make sure they're in the Bible. Make sure they're right. Don't let yourself be led astray and try to stand up for something that isn't of God. I'm back. All right, I checked with my tech crew, and our overall time, we're looking at in the 40s to 45, maybe even 50 minutes, depending on how the editing process goes. So I'm not going to start the third section. I'm trying to keep these under an hour, but not immensely short, because there's a lot to say here. I mean, as you can see, just between the verses, there's so much involved in just this area, standing up for what you believe in, that it takes space. I know that you are out there on the internet, and you're surfing, and you're doing what you're doing. The purpose of this show is to help you be prepared. So, I want to make sure these shows are hopefully enjoyable, informative, and also that they're not going to get so long that you're going to tune out. So I'm shooting for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Now, can I finish this off in an hour? Yes, I could probably finish it. But am I going to be rushing through the last section? Yeah, I would be. So instead of rushing, I'll go ahead and do a third section. And we'll have that out to you within the next couple of days. So, that's going to bring us caught up to this moment. And at this moment, let's go ahead and review where we've come from the very beginning. Now, if you remember, way back when, yeah, I know, just the other day. Yeah, you'll have to forgive me. Okay, we started with how the church has been changing its doctrine and how the church has not been willing to stand up for its own beliefs. And this led to you. Are you prepared to stand for your beliefs? Now, understand that as you are doing this, as we've gone forward, we've talked about how the church, the bishops, and their views. We've talked about how, how Peter denied Christ. Now, remember, this was so important that every one of the Gospels mentioned it, to some degree or another, because denying Christ is something that the Lord knew we were going to eventually do. So, and then we have today where we talked about the different reasons why we have false doctrines, so that we know that when we stand up for the Lord, that we're going to stand up for what's right and what God actually stands for. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you look through history, you have a lot of examples where people stood up for the Lord, but they weren't. They were standing up for a false doctrine based on mankind. One great example that comes to mind is the Inquisition. The idea that we're going to hunt people down and torture them until they confess their sins and change their ways. And if it kills them, well, at least they'll die clean. That is so much against the views of the Bible and against what Christ stood for, to become basically the opposite. There are a lot of reasons why atheism is on the rise. And probably one of the biggest reasons is how many times we as Christians did not stand up for love, but rather stood up in the name of hate and the quest for power and the ability to shove people around and do what we want and make others conform to what we think they should be. This is sad, but it's true. So before we get, this is the reason why I had put off and moved the goalpost, they would say, and moved the actual point of this message, which is to stand up for your beliefs, to another day, to a latter part of this episode. Why? Because we need to make sure what we're standing up for first is of God. And if it's not of love, it's not of God. And that's something we need to get down into our hearts so solidly that it's automatic. When you look at the movie, God's Not Dead, and you see the two preachers, and one of them says, God is great, the other one says all the time. And then the first one says, and all the time, and the response is, God is great. We need to be that automatic with our love. We need to make sure that when we stand up, we're standing up in love, not in hatred. And that's what we'll be covering in the next episode. The point is, I'm giving you some data. I hope you think about them. If people make mistakes, we need to get off our egos and get off our high horses and admit, I've made a mistake. Let's move on. How do I correct this? We need to make sure that when we make mistakes, we don't become antichrists and false teachers. Remember, if you've been called to be a preacher, a teacher, or a servant, anybody who is called to an instructional position in Christ, you are accountable for your words. And if you intentionally lead people astray, there is a very hefty price tag. So, think it over. And I will see you next time on Waiting in Laodicea. Now that concludes this part of this episode. It's a giant episode, I know. And I will probably put up a fourth episode, which is a combination of all three of them, so that you can watch one of them and so forth. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you would like an MP3 version so that you can listen to this on your phone or wherever else as you're driving, send us an email. I try to make an MP3 version of each and every one of these, and as I can afford to, I will improve our website to where we have access so that you can download these episodes on MP3 so that you may hear them in your car as if they were a podcast. And I will look into the possibility of possibly doing these as a podcast. Until then, if you enjoyed part of today's episode, hit that like button. Don't forget to share this with your friends, your neighbors, your family, your loved ones, those that you work with, those that you go to school with, those that you go to church with, your small group. Share it with everybody. Maybe it'll help somebody. Last but not least, please hit that subscribe button and the notification button. The subscribe because, hey, we need the subscribers to get monetized. We need the subscribers to be able to go live. We need this so that we can help support this ministry and allow this ministry to grow and do other things, to do more, to provide you with access to the podcasts, to provide you downloads, to provide you access with other services, whatever we can do, not to mention the number of things that we can do to help you prepare both physically, mentally, and get your go bag set up. So a little bit of support would go a long way. If you would like to support us beyond just hitting that clicking that subscribe button, you will find in the description of this episode a list of different things you can do to support us. Also in there is become a patron. Last but not least, folks, my email is listed so that you can talk to me, tell me when I'm wrong, Ask me for help. Tell me whatever you want. Tell me you think I've got a lousy voice. I don't know. Whatever you want to say, that's what the email's for. It's not my personal private email. It's our public email. Email me. I promise you, I will respond. Now, if you are, an antichrist and you're here to badger me, I will send you a prayer. That is my promise. I'm not going to repay hatred with hate. Rather, I'm going to repay it all with love. And on that note, this is A.T. Martinez for Waiting in Laodicea, praying that God will be with each and every one of you this week, that He opens your heart and your minds